I've been doing this work now of leadership development. So for 30 years, over 30 years. I graduated MIU in 1981, and I started doing this kind of work in some form or another in 1988, 89, somewhere around there. I've been at it ever since. And I have had the opportunity over those last few decades to work with just about every kind of company in just about every kind of industry that you can think of, to help them to create cultures of leadership. So, when you say success, now obviously, the reason leadership in a business context, or in any context for that matter, is important is because the success of an endeavor, the success of an organization, the success of a company is directly tied back to the quality of its leadership. But then there are people that are out there talking about success directly, and they write, I'm going to say, different kinds of books. They have a different kind of approach, which tends to be more in the, read this book and make a lot of money kind of a thing. Now, the implication is, of course, that if you're in business and if you can lead that business well, you will make money. That's what business is about. But success, as we all know, is defined way beyond just the money that we put in our pocket. While that is certainly important, how to do that. And in a business, it is important, of course. It's the bottom line. You're not in business if you're not making money. I get that. But there's a very interesting question that I get asked a lot. And I'm curious, for you guys, if you've asked yourself this question or ever talked to anybody about it. And it's some version of this. What's more important in a business? Is it the money or is it the people? Is it the results or is it the experience? Is it what we show on the bottom line or is it this love thing? Which is it? And if you think about the nature of that question, it's a terrible question, because what it implies is that there's a choice, that it's an either or kind of a scenario. And on some level, we've been conditioned to believe that love has no place in business. On some level, we've been conditioned to believe that love is, there's got a lot of baggage associated with that word, certainly, but love is some kind of California touchy-feely hoo-ha crap, and it's got nothing to do in business, with business. And that's a very deep conditioning, I think, that we've had. I know I'm overgeneralizing, but as a society, so to ask the question, what's more important, love or business, is a fallacious question, because it's one leads to the other. And I'm going to share my thoughts with you on this. I'm also going to share my screen. What a coincidence. Let's see if, hold on, this is me multitasking. So I'm going to roll ahead a little bit like a freight train here, but any time along the way, if you have a question, a comment, a concern, an emotional outburst of any sort, feel free to jump in. We're a small group here live this evening. Obviously, if you're watching this recorded, you can't exactly jump in. I mean, you can, but nobody will hear you. But for those of you who are here with me tonight, feel free to unmute yourself at any time to ask a question or raise your virtual hand, whatever you'd like. Otherwise, I'm just going to roll ahead.
One other thing you could do is you can also chat in to the chat, and if you have a question, I'll bring it up for Steve.
Yeah, that'd be great, Paul. So if you could keep an eye on the chat, because like you've just seen, I'm a terrible multitasker. I am a unitasker, as a matter of fact. So this is what we're going to explore together, and it's based on this book, which came out in 2019, one of my more recent books, and it's called Love is Just Damn Good Business, for one very simple reason, and that is that love is just damn good business. And again, there is a dynamic in this title. You've got the juxtaposition of the word love and the word damn, and it just seems kind of edgy, and that's kind of the point. I want to show you what I've learned about this dynamic of cultivating love and how it shows up in business, and most important, what it looks like. And I think you're going to find that there is, in some ways, this might be a very different way for you to look at business overall. But in other ways, this is only going to be a confirmation of who you already are and what you already do. And for many of you listening to this, this discussion is simply going to be a confirmation from an objective outside source. And my hope is, so I guess what I'm saying is perhaps I'll be preaching to the choir here a little bit. And if that's the case, then my hope is I can just get you to sing a little bit louder, because a lot of us have this instinct already. And we've been conditioned to believe that somehow it has no place in business. You know, just putting the word love and business in the same sentence makes some people squirm. But let me offer you another perspective. My friend Burton Goldfield is the CEO of a company called TriNet. TriNet is a publicly traded company. They're worth, I think, somewhere around $5 or $6 billion now. I got to know Burton when the company was only $300 million and before they went public. And Burton is a great example of a lot of the things we're going to be talking about here this evening. But here's his take on it in his own words. He said, "In my experience, love is a difference maker. It brings an authenticity to a company's culture, and it makes leaders more human and more effective." Now, nice words, but it's, again, the choice of words belies an underlying kind of bias that we have about love and about leadership. The idea that leaders should become more human is an interesting thought. It's an interesting perspective if you think about it, because the fact of the matter is they already are. They already are human. So it's just kind of odd to think that we need to be more human. But nonetheless, what happens when people show up and go to work and start climbing the proverbial corporate ladder and try to, carve out a career in business, again, there's an underlying conditioning that says love really has no place here. Therefore, I'm going to act in a way that will have such an effect on people that they would say about me, "I wish that person would be more human." It's tragic. So to say that love has no place in business is tragic, and it's short-sighted. And in fact, once again, if I could repeat myself, nothing could be further from the truth. Love is just damn good business. So I believe that love is the right word. I think it describes the right experience. And I want to explore that with you. But at first, let me just acknowledge that I wasn't always quite so confident using this language with business people. So, a big part of my work, when I say I've been doing this kind of work for 30 years, what that looks like is a lot of what I do is on a stage, right? So keynote speaking at meetings and conferences and conventions and that sort of a thing, which I love to do. Another aspect of my work, as you know, is writing books. Another aspect of my work is coaching and consulting, going deep within companies to help them operationalize these ideas and put them into practice with some pretty remarkable results, I have to say. So I know that that this is the right approach. But back in the early days, when I was up on stage and starting to talk about this stuff with business people, I didn't know how I was going to fly, frankly, and I was a little bit nervous about it. And I remember one of the first groups that I shared this language with, I was speaking at a conference of 1,000 engineers, and I've done a lot of work with engineers and scientists over the years, so I'm well aware of the stereotype of the engineer, which is something like, I'm an engineer, I don't do that people thing. Keep the people out of my way so I can get my job done around here. It's like nirvana for the stereotypical engineer. I know it's not true, for most, but it still made me nervous when I was standing up in front of 1,000 of these people from the internet and telecom industry, and I stepped out on stage and I started talking about love, man. So I didn't know if this was going to fly or not. I didn't know if they were going to run me out of town or what. So I was being hypersensitive to the body language to see if I was getting through. And from what I could tell, I was actually connecting pretty well. And a couple of days later, I had back to my office and I had an email from somebody in that group who was a manager of LAN technicians, network guys. And at least I got through to him because he wrote to tell me, he said, "Hey, Farber, you know that love stuff you were talking about?" He said, "You're right on, man." He said, "I've been telling my guys this since the day I became a manager 10 years ago." And I thought you would appreciate seeing it in his own words. This is right from his email to me. He said, "I've told my technicians to make the customer absolutely love you, take you home to dinner, love you, meet the wife and kids, love you. Because if the customer loves you, you can blow up their building and they'll say, accidents happen." Which is probably not the best business strategy, by the way. But it does tell us something really interesting about the nature of the customer experience. Okay, so in a nutshell, here's why love is just damn good business, okay? We want our customers, clients, whatever terminology you use, patients, whatever. We want them to love what we do for them, to love the experience of doing business with us. Because anything short of that, we have no competitive advantage. Because now, we've been conditioned to believe that, that we call it customer satisfaction, right? If the customer's satisfied, then mission accomplished. But there's no correlation between a satisfied customer and repeat business. There's no correlation between somebody says, "Yeah, you're pretty good," and word of mouth. But when they love us, that's where the good stuff happens. That's where the payoff happens. So from a purely business consideration, we want our customers to love what we do for them. And this is not earth-shattering news. This is why, many companies put love in their marketing campaigns. This is why many companies print the buttons and hang the banners that say, "We love our customers." And that's as far as it goes. So this isn't about saying the right words. It's not about saying to each and every customer, "I love you, man. I love you, man. I love you, man." It's about, we have to break it down from there. What does it look like? How do they experience it? What can we do to create that experience even more? So I want to break it down another couple of levels. We want our customers to love what we do for them. The only way to make that happen in a meaningful and sustainable way over time is to create a culture or an environment that people love working in. I mean, if I don't love working here, how can I give that kind of experience to my customer? And as a leader, I can't create that kind of environment or culture or contribute to it unless I have it myself first. If I don't love this place, if I don't love this business, if I don't love this team, if I don't love this customer, if I don't love this mission, if I don't love our values, if I don't love our product or service, then the only other choice I have is to fake it. And people have a pretty good bullshit meter and they know when I'm faking it. So if this all gets very personal very quickly, and it's ultimately a very personal endeavor, but it shows up all the way through our business and ultimately to how the customer experiences us. And I know you've had that experience. I mean, we all have. For example, you ever walk into a grocery store and you're looking for something, you can't find it, so you find somebody that works there and you ask for their help. Do you ever have that experience where that moment where you ask for help, it's really obvious that this person hates this freaking place? Do you ever have that experience? Right? You see their eyes roll back in their head and say, it's over there, that kind of thing. And then you've had the other experience too, I'm sure, where you walk in, you ask for help and they light up and they're so happy to take care of you that they walk you to the place and they engage you in conversation and learn a little bit about you. So what I'm suggesting is it's not true 100% of the time, but most of the time, that experience that you have had with that person is a direct reflection of the experience they have in working at that place.
Okay, wait here, stop here.
Okay.
Tell us about the pizza guy.
I'll get there.
Okay, good.
I want to tell you about somebody else first. Yeah, I'm going to tell you a pizza story. So I hope depending on where you've had, where you are, whether you've had dinner or not. No,
Okay.
may or may not be a cruel thing. But first, I want to tell you about an experience that I had in Boston a while back. I was out there to speak to the senior management team of a company called Sovereign Bank. They're now part of Santander, and they're a regional bank up in the Northeast. I live in San Diego. I had never heard of them before. So when they hired me to come and speak, I did my research and spent some time learning about their company, spent some time on the phone, talking with their senior leaders, and learn about the competitive landscape, the mission of the company, and all that good stuff. But I'd never been in one, never been in a sovereign bank. So I got to Boston a day early, and I took advantage of the extra day to take care of some personal business that I had going on, which required my getting a couple of documents notarized. So, I went to the concierge of the hotel. I said, I'm looking for a notary. He said, well, you're in luck, because across the street from the hotel, there is a sovereign bank branch office, and I'm pretty sure they have a notary there. So I thought, all right, that's cool. This is convenient, because now I can go get my personal business done, and I could do a little, reconnaissance work at the same time, a little ghost customer kind of a thing. So I walked across the street, and it was a small branch, just two tellers sitting side by side. I walked up to teller number 1. I asked for a notary. She pointed to teller number 2. She said, that would be Rosella over here. She's a notary. She'll take care of you. I stepped over to Rosella's window, and we started doing the usual notary stuff. Now, here's what I need you guys to know. I didn't say anything to Rosella about who I was or what I was doing there. I didn't tell her that the next day in that hotel across the street, I was going to be speaking to all the big bosses in her company. I didn't tell her anything about my philosophy of leadership. It was just signing and stamping and small talk. And she was lovely, but nothing profound. And then after she stamped the last stamp, I asked her a question that I've asked every notary I've ever used, which of course was, what do I owe you? How much? And she said, oh no, you don't owe me anything. This is just a service that we provide to our customers. And I said, well, Rosella, I'm not a customer. And she said, oh, that's okay. Maybe you will be someday. So I thought, that's pretty good. So then I was just struck with the inspiration to ask her this question, because it occurred to me that right now I could get an anonymous glimpse into the culture of this company through Rosella's experience. So I said to her, hey, Rosella, would you mind telling me, how do you like working here at Sovereign Bank? And I'm telling you guys, there was no hesitation. Her eyes lit up, and she said, I love it. I love it. Just like that, those words, I love it. And then she started telling me about that other bank that she worked for and how terrible it was, but this place was so different because people took care of each other and are very collaborative. And then she started going on about her customers and how fantastic her customers were and the kind of relationships she has with them. And sometimes they stop in just to say hello, even when they have no business to do, because that's the kind of relationship they have. And I have this odd habit that when I'm talking to somebody who's telling me something that's relevant to my work, I like to take notes. So I was jotting down what she was saying on the back of one of these documents. So this is a quote from Rosella. This is one of the things she said to me. She said, I love my customers and I get great pleasure from serving them, so I'm happy. And she was telling me this, this kind of wonderful, kind of virtuous cycle about, I love them. That makes me happy to take care of them. And so I take such good care of them that they love me back and they stop in just to say hello, which makes me happy and want to take care of them more, and on like this, just beautiful stuff. And at one point I looked up at her and I said, hey, Rosella, would you mind if I quoted you on this? And she said, would you like me to notarize it? So what do you think I said?
For sure.
Yes, please. And there you go. She did. So what you're looking at here, this is the back of Rosella's business card. So she took out her business card, flipped it over, wrote those words across the top, stamped it, pushed it across the counter to me. I picked it up, ran across the street, took a picture of it with my iPhone, stuck it on my PowerPoint deck, which is why you could see it now. And the next day I showed it to the senior team. And I said, folks, look what you have going on right across the street. I mean, this is Rosella the teller. I mean, she's unbelievable. And the boss, the big boss, was so blown away by this that he ran across the street to say thank you to Rosella. And you can imagine how that blew her mind and the effect that that had on her, and then therefore on her customers, and around it goes. So please don't tell me that love is no place in business. This is a person completely unprompted. No, it's just obvious. It's just obvious. But what happens is we experience it when we experience it ourselves, either as a customer or as a lucky person working for a really cool company. It's almost like it happens by accident. You know, it's like the stars align, lightning strikes, whatever. But what I'm suggesting is let's not treat that as an aberration. Let's look at that as the ideal, as the goal, and then we got to start figuring out how do we make that happen with conscious intent. So it's not a random lucky occurrence, but it's something that we do. It's something that we create. And the implication is, and again, you know, I'm a business guy. I tend to think about all this stuff in the context of how's it going to affect a company's performance. And of course, one of the ways, the most significant ways that you measure a company's performance is in the value of the company. So could this operationalizing love, could love in a business actually have an impact on how much that business is worth? And I've got some pretty good anecdotal evidence that the answer is yes, that it does have an impact. So, but don't take it from me, take it from Warren Buffett. All right, so Warren Buffett, we all know, possibly the most successful investor in companies the world has ever seen. I saw an interview with him. There have been many, of course, on the Motley Fool website, you know, Stock Advisor guys. And the question that they asked him was, how do you account for your incredible track record, your great success? And he said the usual kind of things about his facility with numbers and his analytical capabilities and, you know, all that good stuff. But then he said that even when everything looks great on paper, before I buy a company or invest heavily in it, he said, I have to sit down in the same room with the CEO and I have to look into his or her eyes. And there's something very specific that he's looking for. So here's what he said. I look into their eyes and I try to figure out whether they love the money or if they love the business. If they don't love the business, I can't put my money into it. And then if he buys the company, he says, then my job is to make sure that I don't do anything that kills that love of that business. Now, I know this isn't hard science, but you know, you look at this 15-second answer and he uses the word love 4 times. And he goes on to say that he said, if I look into their eyes and I instead of love, I see dollar signs and I hear the cash register ringing in the distance, for those of you who remember what cash registers are, he said, then I know that the only thing this CEO is interested in is the exit strategy and how quickly they can stuff the money from this transaction into their own pockets and get the hell out of there. And I'm trying to invest in a company that's going to grow in value over time, and that's not going to happen unless the love is there. So I'm not making this up, is my point. It does have an impact. Let's back it up one more step here. So here's the logic. We want our customers to love what we do for them. We have to create an environment, therefore, that people love working in. And as a leader, as we just heard from Warren Buffett, I have to love it myself first. I have to love the business myself and the people in it, etc. Okay. So I want to start giving you an opportunity to think about where you are in all of this. Because like I said, it's a pretty personal thing. So in whatever business you're in, whether you own a company or you work for somebody else, or you're a solopreneur, or you're in the nonprofit realm, or you're in professional services, it doesn't matter. I use the word company in a generic sort of a way, okay? But let's tee up this part of the conversation At the risk of using an overused example, let's talk just for a second about Steve Jobs. Okay, so we all know the Apple story to some degree or another. In a nutshell, Jobs and Wozniak started Apple Computer in Jobs' parents' garage. I think it was in 1976. He sold his Volkswagen microbus to raise the money to build their first circuit board. That's where it all started. And we know what Steve Jobs accomplished in his lifetime. The part of the story that a lot of people tend to forget about is the period of time where Steve Jobs experienced possibly the most significant and public humiliation and failure in the technology world at that time, when he got fired from Apple. So his own board fired him after he brought in John Scully from Pepsi to help him run the company. And Apple was the love of his life. So he got fired from the love of his life. You can imagine the damage to his now legendary ego and all of that. And then the company went off the rails, and eventually he came riding back in on the proverbial white horse and turned the company around, and the rest is history, as they say. Well, he gave the commencement address at Stanford University to the graduating class of '05. And it's a great speech. You can find it, I'm pretty sure, on iTunes. And I suggest that you listen to it. But he's talking about how he made it through those difficult times. And when he got to the part where he was focusing on those challenges, here's what he said to them. He said, "I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did. The only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work, and the only way to do great work is to love what you do." Or to say it another way, the only way to do great work is to love what you do. So again, I'm not making this up. So here's the thing. At this juncture, it might be easy to misinterpret what I'm suggesting. Loving what you do is, as Jobs is telling us, is important, but it's not the whole story. What was that book that came out in maybe it was the 80s? Do What You Love and the Money Will Fall on Your Head, something like that. Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow, I think it was called.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's true for some, but I think there's a little more to it than that. So here's the way I like to think about it. To wrap it together like this: do what you love in the service of people who love what you do, like the poster you see behind me on the wall. Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. So there are three obvious sections to that. The first is doing what you love, which is the foundation for this whole thing. But if that's it, for somebody who's just doing what they love and don't really care, they don't really care about the impact of their behaviors or anybody else, that's just another way of saying narcissism. So yes, I'm doing what I love, but I'm using that to serve you, to serve the people in my life or in my business. So in the service of people is the context, right? It's the moral context and it's the ethical context, but it's also the business context. So yes, I'm doing what I love, but I'm doing that to serve you, and I'm serving you not just because I feel obligated to. This is that servant leadership element here, but because I want to have a tremendous impact, a positive impact on you, either through my product or service or through our relationship or whatever. And if I can do that, if I can have that kind of an impact on you, the result is reciprocity. You love me in return, or you love us in return. And when you have customers and clients that raise their hand that say, I love doing business with you, that, to state the obvious, is our ideal customer. We want more of those. So we could use this as a kind of a bit of a self-analysis sort of a thing. So here's what I'm going to ask you to think about. And you can write this down, or you can just answer it in your own head. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself in each of those areas? So on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm doing what I love, 1 to 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, are you serving people? And finally, on a scale of 1 to 10, the people that you're serving, to what degree do they love how you're serving them? So it's a reflection tool, but it'll bring into relief where you may want to focus, and what you may want to pay particular attention to in the examples I'm going to share with you here in just a second. So the only one of these that you can really answer on your own is the first one. The other ones you have to get input on. So you might rate yourself. I mean, it's interesting to rate yourself first, right? I think I'm a 10 on the serving thing. And then you talk to the people that you're ostensibly serving and see what they have to say about it. And you may, maybe you get confirmation, or maybe you get a rude awakening. And to what degree do they love how you're serving them? This is kind of a variation of what is known as the Net Promoter Score. And the idea is, and this is where it gets challenging, that we want 9s or 10s on all of these. Anything under a 9 is considered a fail. So if I say, yeah, they give me an 8 out of 10 on the love thing, that's pretty good. It's not. It's got to be a 9 or a 10. And this isn't from me. This is from, I think it was Bain who first started doing the research around the Net Promoter Score. So a good place to start. So here's the question that we're trying to answer in all of this. What should love look like in the way that we do business? What should love look like in the way that we do business? So that is not a rhetorical question. That's a question that I think, all of us needs to answer for our own business, because this is not about love as a sentiment and a warm, fuzzy, abstract feeling. It's about love as a practice and a discipline. So let me give you an example of how one company answered and continues to answer this question. What should love look like in the way that we do business? So the emphasis here is on we. So building a culture, a collection of people. So I'm going to tell you a quick story of a company called Trailer Bridge. So Trailer Bridge is based in Jacksonville, Florida. It's not a particularly sexy business. They ship stuff primarily from mainland U.S. to Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. So they ship barges full of containers full of stuff. That's what they do. Their history, and I'm not speaking out of school when I say this, but Trailer Bridge, they've been around for a little over 30 years now. And they used to be, what's the word? Terrible. They were an awful, toxic waste dump of a place. And again, I'm not speaking out of school. That's the way they would have described it too. The customers gave them terrible ratings. The only reason they did business with them was because they were cheap, and they were cheap because they were terrible. That's the only way they can get customers. They have very high turnover rate. People couldn't wait to get out of there, and find jobs elsewhere. And then, you put that together, you do that for a little while, and you go bankrupt. And that's what happens. They went bankrupt. And as they emerged from bankruptcy, they burned through 4 CEOs in 3 years. They burned through 4 heads of HR in the same period of time. The place was really awful, to put not too fine a point on it. And then one day, the board of the company tapped a guy named Mitch Luciano, who was a recent addition to the senior management team. They tapped him to be the next CEO. And they said, "Mitch, it's your turn." And he refused, because there was a lot of baggage associated with that. It was like, it was a revolving door. And, he said, "No, thank you." So they asked him again. And he finally said, "Okay, look, I'll do it. But here's the thing. I don't want the title of CEO. Give me the title of president, and I'll earn the title of CEO. I won't be CEO until the employees think that I deserve to be CEO." And then he said, "But you got to let me do this my way, because I am a love guy." Well, I don't think he didn't say those words, but that's where he was coming from. So as it turns out, Mitch had read I think I had 3 books by this time. He had read all 3 of them: The Radical Leap, The Radical Edge, Greater Than Yourself. Common theme in all of those is about, love in business. The new book is the one where I actually put it in the title, but it's in all the other books, of course, and it's all about that. And he said, if we're going to turn this place around, I have to make this an environment that people are going to love being in, which is a radical thought, remember, because nobody did, to say the least. So here's what he did. He asked the question, what should love look like in the way we do business? And he started with the physical environment of the place. He said the first thing he noticed that always bothered him was that this was at the time a company of like 120 people, so a small company. And they all walked around with, name tags. And he said, we're 120 people. We should know each other's names. So what do you think he did? He banished the name tags, dumped the name tags, no more name tags, which meant that people had to learn each other's names, including him. So he made a commitment to learn everybody's name in that company, to model the way and lead by example and all that good stuff. And then he looked more deeply into the physical environment, and they had been set up in, it was cubicle city. It was everybody worked in cubicles. Senior managers were in offices. Everybody else was in cubicles that were floor to ceiling. So people would literally work next to each other for years and never see each other. So he did a very simple thing. He lowered the height of the cubicles to force people to look at each other. And, so now, you can look over the cubicle and look into another person's eyes and ask them a question instead of sending them an email. And then he told his managers, get out of the office and spend time with people. And so he said, I gotta create an environment that people want to hang out together. So he went to the break room and he put in a ping pong table, foosball table, popcorn machine, so people would gather together. And then every Thursday he would bring in a food truck and buy lunch for everybody in the company. So they would sit down and have lunch together. They still do that to this day. And what started to happen is people started to form relationships and form friendships, and the experience of being at work started to feel a little bit different. So remember what Mitch is thinking is, I've got to get to the point where people love working here. How will I know? They'll stay. And they'll talk about us to their friends. And these people would, if they loved working here, they'll be our best recruiters, because they were spending tons of money on recruiters, because that's the only way they can get people to come work there. So then they looked at the customer policy. And the question was, what do we need to do to have our customers, to give our customers an experience that they will love? What's it going to take for our customers to love us versus tolerate us because we're cheap? So they looked at all their policies. And here's one example of many. It was a longstanding policy in the company that unless a barge was at least 75% full, they wouldn't sail. So they wouldn't sail until they sold at least 75% of the space on their barge. And the reason was pretty simple, right? If you look at the bottom line and say, well, it's because we lose money. It takes 75% for us to make a little bit of money. So until we get there, we don't sail. Fine, if you ask the balance sheet, but if you ask the customer, it's a different story. I'm shipping a car to my family in Puerto Rico, and it's supposed to be there on such and such a date. It doesn't arrive. I call Trailer Bridge. Hey, where's the car? Oh, it's still sitting in the harbor because we haven't sold enough space yet. That's what was going on. So they asked this question. If we loved our customers, what would we do in that scenario? You get a different answer then, right? What do you think the answer is?
Sail.
We sail. We sail. And that's what they started doing. And what do you think happened? They filled up. And over time, in the first couple of times, there was a bit of a gulp factor, right? Because they did lose money on the first shipment, the second shipment. But then pretty soon, when you put all this together and many, many other things, their reputation started to change. The service level went up. People started to talk about them. And now let's just fast forward the clock. And I'll give you a couple of updates even since I put this slide together. In 2017, they were voted #1 best place to work in the city of Jacksonville. 2018, #2 best place to work, which really pissed off their employees because they still felt they were #1. 2019 and 2020, back to #1 best place to work. I've just gotten some updates from them recently. The earnings from 2015 to 2017 were greater than the previous 23 years of the company combined. The revenue and earnings in 2018 were the greatest in the history of the company. The revenues and earnings in 2019 was the greatest in the history of the company. Revenue and earnings in 2020. So now we're in the COVID era. Best in the history of the company. They're expanding around the country. They've opened up a whole bunch more offices, and they're just killing it. Every time I talk to Mitch, it's just like there's another great story. And if you were to ask him, and by the way, I have many times, and I've interviewed him on my podcast. If you want to go check it out, you can hear it from his own mouth. They did it by creating a culture of love. So, not bad. The board, you think the board's happy with him? I would say so. So the next question is, all right, I don't run a company. I'm not a CEO. I'm just me. I do my thing. Maybe I work for a company, maybe I don't, but we're not exempt from the conversation. So the question is, how can I show, that's me now, my customers and my employees that I love them? So again, whatever context. Because it doesn't matter what you do, you can do this. You just have to ask the question and answer it. Now let's talk about pizza. The aforementioned pizza. I haven't had dinner yet, but I'm going to talk about this anyway. So Joe Jaros was a pizza delivery guy. And he was, he was good at it. But if you were to ask Joe back then when he was delivering pizzas, if he felt like he would be doing this pizza delivery thing for the rest of his life, is this a career for you, Joe? He would have said no. But if you asked him what he felt, how he felt about his customers, he would have told you that he loved them. Now, again, how do I know this? Because he told me. And the question, remember, is how can I show my customers that I love them? So here's what he did. So imagine the scene. He drives up to a house, got a pizza to deliver. He walks up the steps and he sees that the light bulb in the customer's porch was burned out. What do you think he would do? Change the light bulb. Because that's what you do when you love somebody. Change the light bulb and deliver the pizza. And then he lives in Ohio, and Ohio is a place where they have, as opposed to us here in San Diego, they have this thing. It's called what do you call it? Winter. And winter has sometimes this thing called snow. So if he was delivering a pizza in a snowstorm or after a snowstorm, and he drives up to a customer's house and the walk was covered with snow, what do you think he would do? He'd shovel the walk. Deliver the pizza, change the light bulb, deliver the pizza. That's what he would do, just because. It doesn't say any. So he worked, the company that he was delivering pizzas for is a company called Marco's Pizza. And nowhere in the Marco's employee manual did it say anything about changing light bulbs and shoveling snow. But that's just what he did. So what do you think started to happen? Pretty soon, people would call up at Marco's store and they'd order a pizza, and they'd also order Joe. I'd like a mushroom and cheese, please. And would you have Joe deliver it? So this caught the attention of the owner. It's a franchise operation, right? So the franchise owner started to ask the question, who is this guy's amazing? Who is he? And he was so impressed with Joe that he made him a partner in the store. And now, several years later, Joe Jaros owns, last count, 8 Marco's stores. Most recent one he opened was in Florida. He had an employee there who kind of reminded him of himself, and he made her a partner in his store. So he's creating this incredible culture from his own experience, all based on love. Pretty simple. Delivering pizzas. Also in a small town in Ohio, once upon a time, there lived a sweet little old lady, lived by herself, and she fell down one night, hurt herself. It wasn't terrible, but it was scary. She got to the phone. She called for an ambulance. They picked her up. They took her to the hospital. They checked her out, fixed her up. She was fine. It was time to send her home. And that's when they discovered that she had nobody. She was alone on the planet. There's nobody to call. But there was one number that she knew by heart, and that was the number of her local Marco's store where she ordered her dinner all the time. So the folks at the hospital said, well, it's all we got. So they called Marco's and they said, listen, I know this is a little bit unusual, but we have this lovely lady here. She needs to go home, and you're the only number that she has. Is there any way you guys can help us out? And without hesitation, they said, of course. And they sent somebody to pick her up at the hospital and deliver her home. Now, here's what you need to know. That store where they came and rescued that woman with no hesitation whatsoever is one of the stores owned by this guy right here, by Joe Jaros. So you see, he created a culture where that kind of attitude is just the way they do things now, because that's what you do when you love customers. So at the risk, again, the dinner scenario, I'm taking a bit of a risk here, but I'm going to tell you another food related story. So this is my friend Brian Stevens. Brian Stevens is kind of a legend in the branding world in the food industry. So if you've ever been to a fast food place where you see like two brands under the same roof, you see like Pizza Hut and Taco Bell under the same roof, that co-branding thing. I don't know if you remember when all that kind of first started. Well, that was Brian. Brian was an executive at Yum Brands at the time, and that was his idea. So he's, like I said, kind of a legend in that world. Brian started out as a dishwasher in the local, the Holiday Inn in his hometown in Indiana. And he, similar to Joe Jaros, he didn't plan on being a dishwasher for the rest of his life, but he felt, I'm going to do a great job as long as I am. And pretty soon he was given, and he did, and pretty soon he was given a management opportunity. He did a great job as a manager. And then he was recruited by Ponderosa Steakhouse, and he went to work at the Ponderosa corporate office as a young guy, still in his early 20s. And right from the time he got hired there, he started lobbying to get his own store. He wanted to be in the field. He wanted his own store. They didn't want to give it to him because he was young and inexperienced, but he's a very persuasive guy. Finally, they said, fine. You want your own store? You can have Ponderosa Store 319 in Gary, Indiana. Now, why do you think they gave him that store? Because it was the worst store in the chain. It was like, okay, smartass, young punk, see what you can do. So he shows up at this store in Gary, Indiana, the new sheriff in town, right? And he's young, and he looks around and he says, okay, what's the problem here? Well, he notices that uniforms are dirty. People are showing up for work late. They're not doing their paperwork. Just the place was just felt kind of run down. So he gathered his new troops together, and he stood up in front of them and he said, they tell me that this is the worst store in the chain. Now, here's the thing. Every Ponderosa store has the same menu, the same recipes, the same layout, the same uniforms, the same color scheme, the same process. So when they tell me that we're the worst store in the chain, what are they really saying? What's the only difference? It's us. It's the people. And he said, and I don't believe that we're the worst people in the chain. So he said, I believe that we can go from worst to first, and we can do it in 2 years. That was his rousing speech. Great. But then he went to, he had to do the work. So what many people would do under that circumstance is, okay, we just set this big audacious goal and we got to hit it. So come on, people, get your act together. Either you show up on time or you're fired. Either you wash your uniform or you're fired. Either you do your paperwork or you're fired. That's what a lot of people would do, but that's not what Brian did. Brian asked a very simple question. Why is this happening? Why are these things happening? So why were people showing up for work late? Well, turns out this was a fairly impoverished area, and a lot of the people that worked there did not have their own transportation. So that meant they had to take a bus to work, or they had to walk. And public transportation was notoriously unreliable in that area. So what would you guess he did?
He started picking them up.
Yeah, he got in his car and he picked them up and drove them to work. So what happens when you're sitting in a car with your boss on the way to work? What do you think is going to happen? You talk, you get to know each other. Now, why were the uniforms dirty? Well, it turns out a lot of people didn't have their own washers and dryers. So what do you think he did? He collected their uniforms and he washed them himself. He washed their clothes. Why was the paperwork late? Well, a lot of these folks, and these were kids mostly, high school and thereabouts. A lot of them had trouble reading and writing, so they set up a place in the break room. They called it the safe zone, where the other managers would tutor the kids and help them with their schoolwork. And then it became a place where they could talk about what was going on in their lives and the challenges they were having. And he started going to their homes for dinner, and he would go to their weddings and he'd go to their funerals and became part of the family. And on and on and on. And well, as it turns out, they did go from worst to first, not in 2 years, but in one. And Brian went on to become the youngest regional manager in Ponderosa history. And then eventually went on to Yum Brands and, really as time went on, established that name for himself that I mentioned. And when I met him, he was no longer at Yum Brands. When I met Brian, he was the president of a company called Marco's Pizza.
Right.
So Brian Stevens, from the time he was a dishwasher, all the way up to his tenure at Marco's, created this culture that created Joe Jaros, who's gone on to do the same thing. And again, if you were to ask Brian, I wrote about him in the book. He's become a very good friend of mine. He'll tell you that it was about love, and he may not have used the language back in those days at Ponderosa Store 319, but that's where he was coming from. He loved them and he believed in them. And those are the kinds of things you do when you love and believe in somebody. So love is the foundation. Again, it's the starting point, and the framework that I help people and companies with is this, what I call the Radical Leap framework, which is also the title of my first book. Cultivate love, generate energy, inspire audacity, and provide proof. Love generates energy. Love inspires in the environment and in people. Love inspires us to be audacious in our pursuit of great things. And love requires proof. So the extreme leader, as I like to call these people, they do these things consciously and intentionally. They cultivate love, they generate energy, they inspire audacity, they provide proof. And if you get this love thing down, a lot of the rest of this just takes care of itself. And that, my friends, is why love is just damn good business.
I rest your case.
Or not.
No, I love it. I want to throw in a little anecdote, and it has to do with my manager. He's a great guy. But I always like to put my name in my emails as opposed to my my office. He said, "Oh, you should send from the alumni office." I go, I don't want to send from the alumni office. I want people to know there's a person there. And because I love it if someone says, "Here's my phone number, here's my email, call me. If you need something, let me help you." If you send it to the alumni office, there's only one person. Don't send it to them, send it to me. And I really think that there's a concern here in technology. There's so much technology and not enough people. And I think Apple has done a good job in creating the Apple Store because people are helpless sometimes when it comes to computers. The fact that they can go in, they can talk to somebody, they have these, these heroes, the Apple Genius Bar, fine. And because people are lost, and the same thing for the Geek Squad over at Best Buy. They just want the thing to work. Okay, and so I think there's a tension between the tendency to make things very technology driven, and it's all high tech versus high touch. The more high tech we have, the more high touch we need.
I was just thinking that same thing, Paul, because that was John Nesbitt who coined that phrase, high tech, high touch response, and Megatrends was his book.
Exactly.
And it came out like in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And
here we are.
Oh my gosh. I mean, more so than we ever could have possibly imagined. So you're right. I mean, there is this great irony that if you look at like what we're doing right now, we're on Zoom together,
Yeah.
and in some ways, this separation, physical separation through the technology, gives people a chance to get closer together. Right? We're gathered together tonight because we could do this.
Right.
We wouldn't all be like, hopping on a Greyhound bus to Fairfield to listen to this tonight. So there's something about technology that can bring us together, and there's something about technology that can separate us. And what will never change is our desire to be present with our fellow human beings. So it's a dance that we're all dancing here. With artificial intelligence and all that, in some ways it makes our lives more convenient. And if we're not careful, we can let it get away from us and completely lose that sense of presence that we have with each other. So, like what you were just saying, Paul, that's the thing. The technology is great, but how do we show our customers that we love them? That's a personal thing. And part of it is technology, because, it comes down to, user experience and that kind of a thing. We want everything to be easy for the customer. So from a technological perspective, that's a way of showing that we love them, because we care enough about them to create a great experience for them. And why do we do that? Because if we don't, they're going to go somewhere else. So it's just damn good business to do it.
Well, to me, it's like you should always be giving more than they can pay for. You put a little extra in, it's like there's no way you can really pay for, if someone puts more love into their work, no one can really pay you for that. They can't really compensate you for high quality. They can't really compensate you, but they can sure love you for it.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, who's really getting the benefit? Because the difference between a job and a career, a job is, okay, I'm getting paid, but am I getting bliss? Am I getting gratified? Am I growing? So I think the person who gains really is the giver as well.
Well, it's really, yes, as well. It's all of the above, right? And it's, there's something, again, this is not going to be, none of these things are going to be true for all human beings. It's really easy to overgeneralize, but for the most part, this sort of approach to business and to any relationship in our life is intrinsically rewarding. If I work at a place that encourages me to be, bring my authentic self to work and to collaborate and to give value to my colleagues and my customers, I am more likely to be happy at a place like that than a place that is, just driving everything to the bottom line. And of course, the good news is that this does drive everything to the bottom line.
One other thing about what you're talking about, actually, these 3 sentences: do what you love, in the service of people, love what you do. Actually, it's an economic model. It's an economic model of exchange. And if you're not really prospering, you have to ask yourself, which part of that economic model am I inactive? Where am I inactive?
Exactly.
Because doing what you love means you're going to do work that is enjoyable. And most people don't focus on that. They're focusing on the money and they get adrift. But in the service of people, that means you're in society. You're creating an exchange. You're creating value. And again, from a marketing perspective, you need to find things that people actually want.
Yes, exactly.
So that's the third part of your economic model here.
That's right.
So
I could be doing what I love. I could be serving you. I could be doing whatever I can to make you happy and have a positive impact on your life. But if you're not interested in that, in whatever it is I'm offering you, that's not a viable business. And it's a big mistake that entrepreneurs often make. Right? I get really excited about this, but there's no market for it.
Does anybody want it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Some question. So it's interesting. It's like it's an economic model. I don't think it's capitalism or communism. It's got to have a whole name. I think it's loveism or something.
Well, the thing is,
Farberism. It's a Farberism.
Well, I mean, there's a whole discussion going on, a whole movement around, conscious capitalism and compassionate capitalism.
Yep.
They're not mutually exclusive. It's just a different way of looking at it because, we have this kind of stereotypical idea about, the heartless corporation, the heartless business person. There's this kind of understanding that we think we have that says, well, if somebody's really made a lot of money and done really well in business, they must have screwed people along the way and, and have no integrity. And there's a lot of that underlying feeling. And sometimes it's true, but the people that I've met and the people that I've worked with, and I've had a lot of contact with a lot of companies over the years, the vast majority of them are really good people, and at the very least, well-intentioned people who want to do good. As they say, do well by doing good.
Right.
And it's it can be very challenging. If you're an outlier and if you work in a culture where this isn't valued and you value it, then the question you got to ask yourself is, well, what can I do to prove that there's a better way of doing things? And so it's an opportunity that's open to all of us for sure. You just have to. That's why it's about leadership. We have to have the courage to pursue it, even when, and maybe even especially when it's it seems to be frowned upon. And courage, the root of the word courage is the word kur, which means heart.
Heart, right.
So it all ties in together.
The thing is, the word leadership often seems to imply somebody out ahead of the pack.
It does.
The kind of leadership that you're talking about anyone can be a leader within their particular job. They're leading the quality of that job.
The key word there, Paul, is seem to imply that. The fact of the matter is that leadership has ultimately nothing to do with your position or title. Now, having said that, the higher up, so anybody can lead from any position. The higher up a person goes in an organization, even though leadership does not automatically come with the territory, right? We've all known leaders, I'm sure, positional leaders, says leader on the business card, says leader on the org chart, that still have a bit of work to do as far as their leadership goes.
No,
so it's about the position. Yeah, there's some.
Okay.
But
take your word for it.
So just because somebody is, senior vice president or CEO, whatever, it doesn't make them a good leader. They're in a position of authority. But what does happen is the expectation of leadership comes with that territory. So when I assume the title of, for example, CEO, the expectation from the people in my company is that I'm going to be a good leader and not just a guy holding the title, which is why Mitch Luciano at Trailer Bridge said, don't give me the title of CEO, I need to earn it. And by the way, he is CEO now.
Right.
So it's an opportunity for all of us, regardless of position or title.
Anyway, thanks so much. I'm going to commit to getting a broader audience to this video that you've created.
Well, thank you. And let me just invite folks to stay in touch. There's a couple of things that I want to bring to your attention. First of all, if this LEAP framework is intriguing to you, I have a self-assessment you can take at leapassessment.com. It's meant as a reflection tool. It prints out a report, kind of gives you some things to work on, along with some pretty cool content, if I do say so myself. And then, so leapassessment.com. And then the podcast, Love is Just Damn Good Business. We're getting ready to launch the second season. So there's like 64, 65 episodes, got some really, really cool stuff on there. As a matter of fact, I interviewed Tony Nader on the podcast, which was really a lot of fun. So it's a really good variety of folks. And the first episode of the new season is going to be my interview with Richard Dreyfuss, the Academy Award-winning actor.
Yeah.
Man, was that a hoot, let me tell you. I have some editing to do on that one before I release it. And then finally, I'm in all the usual haunts on LinkedIn, etc. So if you can remember my name, you can find me. And I hope you do. And let's keep the conversation going.
Well, thank you very much. And I just really think we're honored to have you speak to us. It's very inspirational. And I thank you again. And just do want to mention next week, Matt Frank and friends are going to be coming and talking about socially responsible investing, which is the other side of business. And that'll be next Thursday. Thanks everyone for attending. It was a great treat. And we're going to archive this on the alumni.miu.edu website, which you will have to log into or become a member of. And Steve, it's been an honor and really inspirational. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Pleasure was mine. Thank you, everybody. It was great to be here with you.
Okay. Bye.
Have a good night.
Good night.